Welcome to One Man's Tracks, the second-hand music channel. Lately, I've become increasingly engrossed in the many stirring, creative folk rock musings and the beautiful melancholy of singer-songwriter Conor Oberst, and I figured I wanted to learn a little more about the man and his many bands. Born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1980, he would write, record, and even release songs throughout his teenage years through his brother's label, Saddle Creek Records. He even managed to sign a record deal while he was still in high school with the band Commander Venus, who through the years 95 to 97 would release a couple of albums before the members would return to their respective groups. Following that, he would form the band Bright Eyes in 98 with the release of his first kind of lo-fi solo folk record called simply a collection of songs written and recorded between 1995 and 1997. Dropping its follow-up, Letting Off the Happiness, just 11 months later, and then an EP in 99, his Forlorn Poetics would gain some traction with the release of Bright Eye's third record, Fevers and Mirrors, in 2000, releasing a couple more EPs and then forming a punk rock group called Desperacitos, who would release their debut album in 2002. Quickly then returning to Bright Eyes and gaining even more traction in August that year with the grander musical arrangements on the record Lifted or The Story Is in the Soil, Keep Your Ear to the Ground. Quickly becoming a worldwide phenom, he'd make the move to the Big Apple, and there he'd find inspiration for not just one but two full-length LPs that he would release simultaneously on January 25th, 2005. Both produced by Mike Mogus and released through Saddle Creek Records, Bright Eyes' 5th and 6th, or 6th and 7th full-length project if you include their Christmas album, I'm Wide Awake It's Morning, and Digital Ash in a Digital Urn. Two records that exemplify Conor's beautiful melancholy with their escapist themes of dreams, drugs, and death, but their presentations are quite dissimilar. I'm Wide Awake being a rawer, more sedate indie folk, almost country album, and Digital Ash staying true to its namesake with more experimental electronic atmosphere and a poppier, more rhythmic approach. Both incredibly moving, relatable albums that are just soaked in Oberst's personally infused emotional archetypes that he delivers with a guileless resolve. Journeys of self-reflection told with clever poetry and carried along with thoughtful, touching melodies, accompanied by many Saddle Creek label mates and guests from the likes of Emmylou Harris to an entire string quartet. With special help from Mr. Mogus, Conor has assembled a pair of phenomenal standout indie rock records that intrigue and continue to echo with truth to this day. Simultaneously depressingly gutting while being uplifting and free. It's a quality of Bright Eyes music that does so well to encapsulate the complexity of the human condition. It's a realism that gives these songs such an overwhelming emotional weight and creates a connection not just with Conor, but really anyone else who's found his words really speak to their souls. Expressing frustrations and loneliness through thoughtful prose and evocative indie expressions, Bright Eyes music gorgeously envelops everyday struggles with the bitterness of reality. On one hand, doing so with a hopeful despondency, and on the other, more boldly confronting those uncomfortable feelings. I struggled for a couple of weeks trying to decide which one of these albums I wanted to sit here and talk about, and then when I finally made my decision, I realized they were released on the same date, and I might as well sit here and pretend they're just a double album. They end up playing just so well off each other with complementing moods and lyrical themes, while staying tonally and technically fairly unique. So different, in fact, that even though they were concurrently released, they had to do separate tours to accommodate for each record. For me, however, they've become pretty inseparable, from the opening plane crash to Not Weeping Over the Easy, Lucky, and Free. I'm caught in for the whole ride of Oberst's tortured wails and clever takes on existentialism, his singing out of tough truths and recognizing the freedom that comes with confronting uncertainty is what brings these records together seamlessly. Striking familiar, comfortable balances between traditional, digital, and organic sounds to create a couple of records that I just can't seem to get enough of. The sincere, youthful weepings going from boyish and headstrong to vulnerable and profound from one line to the next. With his tongue in his cheek and his heart on his sleeve, Conor Oberst displays a longing for connection and understanding across these 22 tracks that personally makes me feel a little less alone when I'm trapped in the darkness. And really, it's hard not to have a little smile on your face when you listen to the cheeky happy birthday plane crash opening of At the Bottom of Everything. An introduction that manages to find some levity in tragedy, this evocative, matter-of-fact, tone-setting song that is a little all over the place, but it's also just so invigorating. It jumps around with a bluegrassy flair, telling it how it is, and has some lovely harmonies that open this thing up nicely. Things turn dispirited quickly with We Are Nowhere and It's Now, pointing out some of life's dichotomies. It's a track that feels like someone slipping in between the cracks into this sort of liminal in-between that isn't uncomfortable per se, but it isn't really anywhere at all, and it can be a really difficult place to get out of once you've been trapped in it, especially if you don't have any help. Then on to one of the saddest protest songs, Old Soul Song for the New World Order, that is dejected to the last lines when Oberst's hopeless howls start to turn towards desperation. It certainly still connects, but in this weird, somewhat disconnected way, like being too close to trauma to be able to process it. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say Lua is a definite favorite here, with its poignant storytelling, intoxicating cadences, and uncomfortable familiarity. It manages to cut to the core of a sentiment that I feel is quite complex to describe. With words and feelings, it manages to express the fickle nature of nocturnal foundations, how nighttime and restlessness can skew biases and lead to sometimes irrational and regrettable decisions. Next, we have the dismal gratitude of Train Underwater that does its best to dispel rapturous thoughts with a low-key honky-tonk swing and some quasi-sarcastic Christian puns. It brings us to Bright Eyes' most accessible single yet. It's First Day of My Life, and it's a simple, stripped-down acoustic ballad that is absolutely breathtaking. It is, however, unorthodoxly on the nose for Conor's writing, and as sweet and captivating as it is, its upfront nature tends to lead to less satisfying returns on repeated listens, or maybe it's just a case of this song being overplayed. Regardless, it's a lovely and syrupy moment of levity that is quite welcome before we get back on that anxious road with another traveling song. It's another one that has the pedal steel bringing that honky-tonk swinging flair, and it creates an uncustomarily jaunty atmosphere here. The flowing melodic vocals do quite well to mask the words that are behind them, which are conversely these sort of mismatch of wayward observations and intangible daydreams. It seems to express feelings of imposter syndrome as well as just describe the manic nature of a life on the road. Time for a dejected escape. It's the infectious, lugubrious, landlocked blues. Sedate but matter-of-fact, it's a surprisingly striking combo with its lovely harmonic crests and its fluttering guitar and trumpet interludes, the rare use of repetition in the lyrics here, and the clever way in which it's woven into the song's narrative makes it all the more impactful and has me locked in and singing along each time. The weight of the track Poison Oak is crushing. It's this heavy-hearted eulogy for a troubled childhood friend, an emotional recollection and reflection that somehow turns the loss into a sort of cynical motivation. It's a strange sentiment, but I think it's pretty well reflected in this song's closing statement. The sound of loneliness makes me happier, as if the song itself can start to be the bandage or the support that helps to ease the loss. That sentiment is further emphasized in the classic Beethoven appropriating closing song, Road to Joy. We get a galvanized self-awareness, a sense of the life we've been shackled with, and the freedom to just say, fuck it up, let's make some noise. Triumphantly sending off, I'm wide awake, it's morning, with a biting enthusiasm. Like I said, I just cannot get enough of how effectively Conor Oberst paints his painful and uncomfortable emotional experiences. His particular way of expressing and identifying irony with a vulnerability and a passion that doesn't feel over-exaggerated. It strikes true. He has just such a remarkable ability to capture the ethereal nature of the human condition. It's just so difficult to pick one of his albums over another, especially when the conception of these is one right after the other, and so I'm just gonna continue to reserve the right to not choose. Diving right back into Bright Eyes with a spacier blend of elusive, quasi-sarcastic distractions. It's time for some digital ash in a digital urn. Starting out in true Bright Eyes fashion with an avant-garde sonic experiment as part of the opener time code. This time letting you know that the sound palette and compositions are going to be headed in a slightly less traditionally structured direction, with disjointed drumming interspersed with these hazy ambient sections. This song feels as if I'm in a dream about to wake up, or maybe just drifting in and out of consciousness. Waking up to a harsh reality on the following heartbroken, goldmine gutted, about the destructiveness of drug addiction and the loss of a lover who couldn't break the cycle. It's very poetically told and bitterly delivered with a full and reflective atmosphere. Continuing with the theme of passing on, Arc of Time time code is a contentious affront to Christianity and the afterlife. It's told through a cheeky smile and a bouncing beat. It really is a brilliant satirical perspective piece that hits and sticks. Making a grim return to drug addiction down in a rabbit hole is a nearly industrial track with an eerie string arrangement. It's dark and disorienting, but as Bright Eyes seems to do so effectively, it maintains this degree of beauty throughout all of that melancholy. When I first heard it, this album's lead single, Take It Easy, Love Nothing, sounded like a cheery Animal Collective song, but in reality it's about one-night stands and the compartmentalization of feelings. And as problematic as it might be, I think it's still a really fun, escapist banger whose energy is welcome amidst this dreary ash hole we've gotten ourselves into, because we get immediately thrust back into the pitfalls of alcoholism with Hit the Switch, a battle of perspectives, a one-sided give and take, and like usual, the empty existential justifications that allow for a fuck it attitude to prevail. Sure, he may be a bit of an ass, but he has a hell of an ability to paint a picture with words, musically illustrating his struggles, bearing his ugly truths all across the stage for us to dance and sing along with. I can't help but hear 99 Luftballons when I listen to the intro of I Believe in Symmetry. It doesn't last too long, and we get another rich string section that accompanies us along for an even deeper plunge down this existential rabbit hole, contemplating the many contradictions in life, the frivolousness of existence, and eventually finding some meaning and solace in the fact that whatever we leave behind is what the people that come after us receive. Slipping even deeper into the Matrix next, continuing the ongoing perspective battle with Devil in the Details, plagued by indecision, unable to tell the difference between love and lust, and trying to trick himself one way or another. Musically, this one isn't quite as gauged, quite as fluid as the last few, it being a more unsettled, open, slower, sing-speaky style, kind of Arctic Monkeys-esque, but a little more lost. At this point in the album, as we transition from track to track, we encounter some peculiar ambient kind of found sound interludes, a production style that reminds me quite a bit of a different collection of Animals, that being the Elephant Six Collective, and I think the song Ship in a Bottle is the song that best exemplifies that style. It's simultaneously a throwback while still staying strange and contemporary. Don't you love what is intangible? Escapist anthem Light Pollution is a moving piece of indie rock about the maddening cost of freedom. It takes us onto the love-struck theme from Pinata that has found this odd way of continuing the chain of self-sabotage, somehow manipulating his mindset to see it in this positive, hopeful light and find a way to keep holding on to the person that he wants to want him. Finally closing out with Easy, Lucky, Free, an uplifting outlook on that ever-intrusive fact of life that Conor really can't seem to shake with this album here. Death. It's not looking for remorse or tears, just understanding that as hard as we fight against it and as scary as it may be, there really isn't anything as easy, as lucky, or as freeing as being released from this mortal coil. And so with that last musical band-aid applied, we can go forth with the understanding that until the code gets cracked or whatever, we can rest easy knowing that that freedom will be there when our time comes. Perhaps it's not the healthiest dose of nihilism for everyone, but I feel like the way it's been packaged here by Bright Eyes makes it so palpable. The truth isn't pretty, nothing is fair, and life is hard. You've gotta embrace impermanence, confront the uncomfortable, accept what you're given, and just try to make the best of it. What a treat these records are. I can't wait to try their associated EP as well as the live album, and I feel so fortunate to have so much Conor Oberst material outside of the Bright Eyes stuff, the bands that he was a part of following the 2007 Casadega release, the Mystic Valley Band, and the supergroup Monsters of Folk, and that's not even mentioning the more recent output, the work he's done with Phoebe Bridgers on the Better Oblivion Community Center. There's just so much great stuff. I'm so looking forward to trying. Bright Eyes has 2 more studio LPs that I ought to mention before closing out here. You got 2011's The People's Key, and more recently they got back together in 2020 and released Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was. There's also, even more recently, 2 companion EPs that are some covers of some of these songs if you're even looking for more. I'd love to know your thoughts on either I'm Wide Awake It's Morning, Digital Ash and Digital Urn, Bright Eyes, or anything Conor Oberst related. What are your favorites? Which of those side projects do you think I should check out first? If you're looking for more interesting music based on this, I'd say try out one of these 2 albums, and like the video for making it this far. Subscribe for more throwback retrospective reviews. Great records always coming at you whenever I find them. Thanks so much, guys. Take all the best care. I know that it is freezing, but I think we have to walk